Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Reynolds. I'm the Director of the Office of Downtown Development at the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. And with us today, we have the Assistant to the County Manager for Public Affairs, Mr. Chris Floor. And we are so excited to have Chris. He is actually going to help us focus on crisis management. And this webinar was a brainchild of Tess Harper, who is our Communications and Training Coordinator. And Tess has had a working relationship with Chris when she was, part of the Main Street program, assisting on the board of directors back in Macon, which is now a consolidated local government. But with that being said, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you, let you do introductions and kick it off.
Thank you, Jessica. Again, my name is Chris Floor, and yes, we are a consolidated government since 2014, and making us the 4th largest city in the state. It's kind of exciting. Thank you for having me. This is, you all are Main Street programs, and I'm sure you're all looking at this going, we probably don't have to deal with hurricanes a whole lot, Chris. Why is that your first slide? Well, let me tell you, I never thought I'd be dealing with a hurricane in Georgia at all, and here we are 2 hurricanes later. So I wanted to use this because of the great success we had in the response of Hurricane Irma, as well as to let y'all know that everything we're going to talk about today is scalable. No matter what you prepare for when it comes to a crisis, you're going to get one that comes out of the blue. Most of our crises deal with crime. They deal with tornadoes and that kind of severe weather. Nothing like what we went through back about 2 years ago when Hurricane Irma came through. So let's start from a big broader perspective. Who am I? I'm the father of 2 and husband to the best wife. I'm kind of a runner. I am a school board member for my child's school. I run the public affairs office here. I'm a partner in First Pillar Consulting, which does government work around the state. I'm a trainer for the Carl Vince Institute of Government, a couple of awards, right, for engaging local government leaders, and whatever Tess tells me to be. It's pretty much how I got involved here, where she called one day and said, you should do this. And I said, yes, ma'am. All right, so let's start bigger on what I do. What is public affairs? We handle strategic communication. We handle the traditional media. We are partner in government relations. We handle online and social media, photography, graphic design, customer service, crisis communication, and other jobs as assigned. That sounds like a lot, and the 4 people on the screen, the left, that's all we have. So we have a lot on our plate. Each one of us is running about, in the typical PR world, would have been 2 to 3 full-time jobs. So Chris, should we have a plan? Well, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. No matter what, you have to have a plan to communicate when the crisis hits. It's not a matter of if a crisis is going to hit, it's when. Again, y'all are Main Street programs, so let's just say a tornado hits the county and knocks out the power grid. You're going to be involved with your downtown merchants. Let's say you decided to start a parade and some residents and businesses have started a protest against the parade for whatever reason. You should have some kind of crisis communication plan in place to handle that, because if you don't, someone else will. And should have a plan, because a very wise Jedi once said nothing happens by accident. You're going to see a bit of Star Wars peppered through this, and apologize to those that don't like it, and I'm going to high five those of y'all who are laughing right now that it is involved in my PowerPoint. Yes, you should have a plan, because if you're not telling your story, someone else will. People aren't sitting around in a crisis just assuming that people are going to tell them what's going to go on. People are looking for information in a crisis, and in the absence of someone telling them, they're going to find information. A plan helps you solve issues and better respond. That's going to come up later when we talk about two-way communication. People are going to get answers to their questions, whether it's from the right place or not. You all know how it goes. Someone says, well, why is the downtown street closed? Well, if you don't respond why the downtown street's closed or have a good way to get an answer to them, someone's going to make something up, and that's what you're going to run with. It also helps improve public safety when it comes to crisis communication. The danger is not to know the truth, said Jedi Master Yoda. So should you have a plan? Yes. The thing is, though, a plan is only as good as those who see it through. So you need three components to communicating effectively. You need a strategic plan. You all already have that. You're working your Main Street program in its 4 points. You need a communication plan. You need to know ahead of the crisis how you reach people, how often you need to reach them, what you're going to want to say, and you're going to need that already in place. You can't be scrambling after the tornado to think, how do I reach the local press? You're not going to want to after the hurricane hits to think, how am I going to reach my businesses and let them know when the power is and isn't back on? You're also going to need the ability to implement, and that means you need a team around you. I recognize your Main Street programs, you probably only have 1 or 2 people, but that doesn't mean you don't have a team around you that can help. You want to find key communicators in your community that can help you get your message out. So when you're looking at a crisis ahead of time, when you're in the preparation for a crisis or when you're preparing your plan ahead of time, you first have to decide, what do you communicate? That's the first thing. It's not put a press release out. It is, what are you trying to communicate? So you have to identify what people need and what you want them to know. And those are 2 totally different things. You also need a 2-way communication model to both distribute and collect information. That way you're reaching people with information and you're getting feedback from them on what they want to know. So there is the want to know is, are schools closed? That's what people want to know in a crisis. Are the schools closed? What they need to know is how to be prepared and always be prepared. Fun story from a former life of mine when I was in education PR. We'd started the social media for the schools, and 6 months later, 6 months after starting it, we only had like 400 followers. We were putting everything we thought people wanted to know. It was kids, it was awards, it was public input sessions, it was board meetings, it was groundbreaking, it's everything that you thought people would want to know about their schools. We get to a Friday morning and the weather girl says, Sunday night, we might have the small possibility that a few flurries might be seen, maybe. Now, those of y'all, you're all in Georgia, you know what Georgia weather's like. That's a lot of ifs for 3 days out. Doesn't matter. Our phone, the voicemails at our schools were full before they opened school that morning. Are you going to open? Are you going to? We hear there's snow. Why are you closed? Why aren't you closed yet? Why aren't you closed? I went to my superintendent at the time and I said, let me put out a press release this morning. This is Friday morning. It says, we are monitoring the weather. We will make the call on the status of Monday school on Sunday night when there's a better weather forecast. And we will announce it first on Facebook. Now, I should say that at the time I was working off of a small netbook. I had an external Wi-Fi card, and our emergency operations bunker is an actual nuclear bomb shelter, 21-inch reinforced concrete walls. The time it takes to cycle out thousands of emails through that netbook, through an external Wi-Fi card, and through those walls was about 20 to 30 minutes. On Facebook, I could step outside, quickly post from my phone, and get it out much quicker. So there was a logistics piece here. But I put it there to say Facebook first to drive people to the page. 1,600 likes in 3 days. That's what people wanted to know, we found out. They were more interested in that than they were about all the rest of it. All right, so you figure out what you want people to know. Well, you need to say, how do you communicate? You can't just say, send a press release and post it on the website. I'm sure you all heard this. Go put a press release out. It'll get attention. And this is what you want. This is actually one of our Hurricane Irma press conferences. I have full media market there, multiple reporters from a couple of the stations. I've got Georgia Public Broadcasting there. I've got the paper. I've got the Spanish newspaper in town. They're live. Every one of them is live broadcasting the press conference. This is what you want. What tends to happen, though, and what could happen, is this. If you just send a press release out and you just post it on your website, it's kind of lazy, because this is what could happen. You might get coverage. That coverage is written by someone else, and maybe someone saw or read about it, and you might get a pat on the back if you get coverage. Let me jump to that third point. Maybe someone saw or read about it. I used to be the guy who set all the newscasts to DVR, all 5 or 6 hours of television broadcast. I knew when the news came on the radio. I listened to it all. I watched every single news story out there, and I critiqued it. And I checked for corrections and I watched it religiously. And then I had kids. I don't think I've watched a 6 p.m. newscast in 5 years. I can't. That's when I'm cooking dinner for the boys. So you got to figure, even if you get this level of coverage from your press release, and it shows up on the 6 o'clock news, let's say that story airs at 6:02 that night on your top station. That means everyone has to be watching that station at 6:02. Because if they tune in at 6:06, they've missed the story. Just because you got coverage doesn't mean you've reached people. Let's stick with the media for a second. There is the criticism of the media. It's 24-hour news cycle, but it's not 24 hours of news. And this goes back to if you get the coverage, you are relying on someone else to tell your story. Right now, there is a real criticism, and it's not true across the board, that the media have to get the news first, not necessarily factual. That translates into mistakes on social media, and they can build stories on tweets and posts and opinions, not facts. So you've got to find a way to work with your press to get them the real story, make sure they get it accurate, but you still need a way to reach people directly. Part of the criticism of media is not necessarily their fault. They've had a reduction in local news staff, both reporters and editors. In my market, it means we have young reporters fresh out of college. They don't understand your local issues. A lot of your veteran editors that have been in the market for a while aren't there anymore to guide and train them. A current piece of media is the fair and balanced approach. And that not necessarily mean the Fox News slogan, fair and balanced. It means they're looking for the he said, she said. If you say this, they're going to find someone who says the opposite. It's not a research proven story. It's basically they're showing both sides. So again, you've got to find a way to reach people directly. Now, in their defense, traditional media remain a trusted source for information. When it comes to the news, there's no substitute for a factually balanced story. People still trust local news organizations. No matter what you hear these days about fake news and the national news, people know their reporters. You probably have an anchor who has been on the news for 20 or 30 years. They trust him or her to speak. They want them to tell them what's going on. We still have that trust. One of my favorite stories of trust was we brought a reporter in. This was actually tied in with Main Street. Reporter calls me one morning and says, "Hey, I need a story, kind of a slow day. What can I do?" And I looked at him, I called him up and I said, "Hey, we just had our Main Street Macon presentation last night to the public. Your station wasn't able to be there. I can make my Main Street manager available, and I think I could book you some time with the mayor." He said, "That's great. We can make this happen." Did the interview with our Main Street manager, brought him in to talk to the mayor. The mayor gave his interview in 10 minutes, but then he kept the reporter there for an hour. And for those of you who have met my mayor, he's got an hour-long spiel in his Southern drawl that is awesome to listen to. He gives this reporter this hour-long spiel and brings him over to his side, gives him all the facts, gives him the background, gives him things, and just convinces him that what we were doing downtown and with Main Street program was working. We get to the 6 o'clock news that night. The reporter does his stand-up live from outside City Hall, and the entire show opens this way. And those of you all familiar with media know we typically start with weather. It started with this line: "The mayor of Macon has a plan for the city, and it's working." That's how the show kicked off. Clapped my hands, again, this pre-kids, packed my stuff up, and I went home, because there was no better way to do that, because we had gotten a reporter, a third party, to announce that to the public. And that's why we have such a strong focus on media coverage. That the burden of that really lies on me personally. I do have some people in the office, but the media is my side of things. And you can see the number of stories and how many days we've gotten covered each year. Yes, it did drop off in calendar year 18, but that is solely due to a reduction in staff, which meant that we've each taken on additional jobs. But 700 stories in a year is a pretty significant amount of coverage for our market. All right, so we've talked about what you want to say, and we've talked about how you say it, and we kind of went back and forth in the media. So how should you communicate? If we've got this need for press coverage, but there's also the criticism of press, how should you communicate? You want to communicate before, during, and after the crisis. You want to do it consistently and constantly. The first time your public hears from you should not be right before the storm hits. And they don't need to stop hearing from you after the storm, right after the storm hits. There's a whole process that goes into crisis communication. You should do it across all useful channels. Well, that means public forums and meetings, social media, websites, e-blasts, printed publications, people walking in on the street, traditional media. Oops. So what do I mean by all useful channels? Well, you're not going to want to communicate through Snapchat if you've only got 2 Snapchat followers. That's not really effective. You don't want to stand on the corner of a vacant street and holler out loudly hoping someone hears you. The analogy I like to use around the state when I do this trainings is everyone's got the old man's group. It's the guys who meet at Waffle House on Wednesday and they think they're the power brokers. Well, if you're trying to reach the old man group and they meet Wednesdays at Waffle House, you're not going to IHOP on a Thursday. That's what I mean by useful channels. You need to go where the people are. Let me give you a story on print about people walking in off the street. It's hard to gauge, but when people start randomly calling phone numbers at the city, they're just looking for information. They don't care what department they're looking for. They just want answers. And so when we do crisis communications, we make sure our employees have the information we're giving to the press. That way, if someone were just to call our public works department, the front desk of public works knows everything we're trying to say to the public. That way they can answer questions because we don't need to be bouncing people around. So you want to make sure your internal audiences are aware of what you're communicating so that the public can find out. From a Main Street perspective, if you've got businesses that you've engaged as partners and you've got a crisis in your downtown area, make sure that your key communicators of downtown business know what's going on. So when the public walks into that restaurant and there's someone there at the host or the restaurant, they walk into a boutique and they're getting their hair done and they ask what's going on, they can get an answer. You're providing your key communicators an answer to those points of touch between your Main Street program in your area with the public that's just there. Should you have a plan? Yes. What you've got to do is you take that core story or message, that central piece, that press release that includes what people want and what they need to know, and you find a way to deliver it to audiences through your web posts, your social media, your video features. Everything ties into that core message, and it all has to be aligned. One of the things we do, and we'll go into when we get to Hurricane Irma, is we have 30 some odd agencies that participated in that response. It didn't make sense for every agency to send out its own press release of information and web posting. So we combine them into one single daily update. That way people have one place to go, and we deliver that in different ways from our office. All right. So before, during, and after, let's talk Irma. This is going to get into the meat of what we did for Hurricane Irma and how you can scale it up or down. When Hurricane Irma hit, we were at full activation, and we are in a nuclear bomb shelter. It is very tiny. We had 100+ people down there, and there was no room to move. I could not bring in the reporters into that. There was no room for them. So what we do throughout the year when the sun is shining and nothing's going on, we pull back the curtain, and we show the public what we're doing. We bring them to our monthly ESF meetings. We took them with us to Emmitsburg for our national training. If it's just severe weather, like a possible tornado, and there's only about a dozen of us in the bunker in the EOC, I bring the reporters into our nerve center and show them what we're doing so that when the big crisis hits, those reporters already know what we're trying to do, and they have a level of confidence in our efforts. That also shows people throughout the year that we are always preparing for this. So when the crisis does hit, there is some general understanding that their government is ready for it when it happens. So preparation, Irma's dates 1 through 3. This is about September 4th. When we start talking to the Red Cross about sheltering, we focus on Red Cross and sheltering. We start talking to our partners, because if you remember, Irma was supposed to, we thought we would be a shelter network. We weren't supposed to get hit at first. So it was all about shelters, where the shelters could be, how we accept them, how we get the word out. On day 3, September 6th, it really looked like we were going to have a shelter. So we began our large-scale public communication at this point. We held a press conference to tell people what we were doing to prepare for the evacuees. At this point, we weren't getting them. We hadn't opened a shelter yet, but we were starting to get the press calls. What should we do? What should we do? What should we do? Even though we didn't know if we would get how we were going to get hit. So we tell people what we're doing to prepare should the evacuees come. We talk about how people should start preparing just in case, because again, we think we could get some impact from a hurricane. So go ahead and get your batteries, get your flashlights, get your weather radio. Stock up on your milk and bread so you can have your milk bread soup. Talking about partner agencies, as I said in the last slide, we knew the Red Cross would need volunteers to help with the shelter. So part of our message was, if you would like to help with the evacuees, here's the contact information for the Red Cross, and here's how you become a volunteer and you can help. We were trying to fill the need of the press to talk about the hurricane, but fill it with our information. Looking at day 7 and 8, it starts to track differently. Our communication on September 7th were the recent weather updates. That we always led with, here's what we know today. We knew we'd get some weather impact, so we started talking about preparation. We needed a way to, hold on a second. On day 8, we reiterated the needs of the Red Cross and the Salvation Army. On day 8 was Friday. We knew that some impact was going to happen on Monday the 11th. We had the shelters getting ready to open up on Friday. That's when we started to open them up. We set our EOC to a 12-hour operation to manage those facilities. But this is Friday, and we knew we were going to hit on Monday. The weekend news cycle is very low. We have one TV station that does not have a weekend broadcast, and there's fewer reporters on the weekend. And we needed this to be a conversation, because if it's hit on Monday, we had to keep their attention. So we held Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock a massive press conference. We had the superintendent of schools, we had the mayor, we had our EMA director, we had our transit authority, we had Georgia Power there. Every partner that could be possibly involved, we put them, and that's that press conference I showed you earlier, we put them all in front of the camera. That way, we were raising the level of our preparation from the public eye so that it would carry through the entire weekend. I guess I got to skip that. So there's the press conference you see there. One of the things you have to realize when you're doing crisis communication is recognizing the lay of the land nationally. The hurricane that hit Texas the year before Irma, the church leader got lambasted for not opening his church to the evacuees. We have an auditorium that holds several thousand people. I knew that someone's going to ask, why aren't we opening the auditorium? Why are we opening 4 and 5 recreation centers? Well, what people didn't know is Georgia Power was using the auditorium, and you see the cots there, as their staging area. We were the staging area for most of the state of Georgia, for Georgia Power. And so we had Georgia Power stand up and say that in the public conference, and we released this picture so that people would know we were using every possible means. So days 6 and 7, this is days 6 and 7, September 9th, September 10th. This is Saturday and Sunday. Red Cross needed volunteers. We set up our commission chambers to be a Red Cross training facility, and that was one of our key messages. We need help. We need people to staff these shelters, because if the Southeast hit as hard as it was, we're going to need people helping deliver food and taking care of people. So we opened a couple of the shelters. We needed nurse volunteers. We had Georgia Power and AT&T response on Saturday. And as you can see on the picture on the right, that's probably 150 people in that one session learning to be Red Cross volunteers. That was Saturday. On Sunday, the day before, we went to full activation of our Emergency Operations Center, and we held another press conference Sunday afternoon. We knew we were going to get hit, so we were running concurrent operations, a shelter operation and a response operation. We needed to, again, get into the news cycle and above what everyone else is talking about. So we held another press conference, and we gave the most recent weather update. The schools will be closed. We led with that. Schools were shut down. Government closed down. No air travel out of our airport. The transit system was shut down. So we gave the weather update, preparedness tips. We gave we again gave a sign up for our emergency notification system, phone, text, email, and how to report damage. We went ahead and started talking about how to report damage because we knew on Monday there would be damage. So we all roll into the EOC about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning on Monday, September 11th, and our communication went full bore on email, text, phone calls, social media, just giving, because the Irma rolled through very slowly, and it was an all-day event for us. We had live shots with press. We did live shots on Facebook. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon is when the main threat was scheduled to come over. So at 1:30, we did a big push on social media, on our website, and with our email and text communications that said, here it is, stay inside. No, that was our messages all day. Stay inside, don't be on the roads. This is going to go on all day and probably into the night. Just be ready. Hunker down. So 2 o'clock it goes over. At 5 o'clock, the power goes off on our EOC, and you can kind of all hear us gasp a bit. Thankfully, the generator kicked in, and we were good. 6 o'clock, it had mostly passed us over, and at 7 o'clock, we rolled our crews. Georgia Power rolled their crews, Public Works, our parks crews, anyone we could get into trucks and start clearing the roads, because we had 200 plus roads blocked, 250 intersection lights were off or flashing, and we had 55,000 Georgia Power customers without power. Once it passed over, we put out a communication saying it had passed. We told people to stay off the roads. We gave an update on what was blocked. We gave an update on lights. We talked to the press, and we put out a lot of social media. We were tweeting that as we got damage reports and roads closed from our crews and from the public, we were tweeting those out so people would know where they were. The next morning on the 12th, we gave morning media interviews. The media is very close to my office, so there was no roadblock there, and so we gave 6 a.m. media interviews during the morning shows. We reiterated to people to stay home. We gave safety precautions. We encouraged people to sign up for more of our notification systems. We told people how to report damage. We needed to know where the damage was so we could get to it quickly. Remember when I said during a crisis, you have to communicate before, during, and after? Well, Irma had passed over, but the crisis wasn't over. You still had recovery. We had 4 full evacuation centers. We still had all the lights off. We still had all the roads blocked. So every day at the end of the day, we started every day with media interviews. At the end of the day, we put out an e-blast that detailed everything people wanted to know. Were schools still closed? How many roads had been cleared? How many Georgia Power gave us? How many lights had come back on? How much power had been restored? When things would be reopened? And that made the news cycle. We would get that out about 4:30 in the afternoon, so it would make the 5 and 6 o'clock news. And the next morning we'd reiterate during the morning shows. Every single day we did that because we knew that with 55,000 customers without power, with all the roads being blocked, that someone's not going to be happy until their power comes back on. Because some people had it back on Tuesday, some people didn't get it for 5 days. But we had to show every day how hard our crews were working. We went into the field and took pictures of crews, the linemen up on the repairing the wires, and our crews chainsaw cutting the trees. We needed to show people that their government was working for them. It continued for several months. There was so much debris. We had somewhere near almost 100,000 cubic yards of debris that was on the roads. It took us about 3 months to get all that cleaned up. And so our closeout communication came as we every day tweeted out the amount of debris we collected, and we had a heat map from our contractor that showed what areas they were working in, just to show people that every day we were somewhere getting the debris off the street. We did celebrate a little because at the end of the day, we judged this. I haven't been skipping my PowerPoint slides. So the tropical storm hits, you see us working, giving the interviews. We went out and took pictures of the damage. And then we went out and showed people doing the work that needed to be done to clean up the community. The Public Affairs Office essentially moved into the Emergency Operations Center for about a week or 2 at this point. So to close out, We talked about great, from Star Wars, great leaders inspire greatness in others. The week after Irma, we brought representatives from all our agencies to be thanked at our commission meeting. We prepped a video that showed all the work that went into it. We thanked them because at the end of the day, there was no loss of life or significant injury. People stayed home. Our communication plan worked and our messaging was heard because people were prepared. They did stay home. Again, it was just property damage. And so we'll run through this real quick. This is the video that we showed at our commission meeting that we put together in about 24 hours after we were able to collect some of the data.
Preparation for Hurricane Irma has been a massive effort by dozens of organizations with hundreds of people helping both local citizens and those who had to evacuate from Florida and South Georgia. For more than 8 days, crews worked around the clock to shelter those who needed it, get ready for the storm, weather the storm, and as we're still doing, recover from it. From September 11th to September 13th, 70 Bibb County deputies worked 665 overtime hours, many of them going to work in the midst of 50-mile-per-hour winds. The Red Cross of Central Midwest Georgia served more than 1,500 people over 8 days in 5 shelters, and they had more than 250 volunteers. The Salvation Army of Central Georgia prepared 8,270 meals with 23 volunteers and 17 employees. Our emergency animal shelter had 35 dogs, 12 cats, 3 rabbits, 25 volunteers, and 11 animal welfare employees. Georgia Power has restored service to more than 55,000 homes. 254 traffic signals and intersections are repaired. More than 600 trees and counting are cleared from our streets. And there have been thousands upon thousands of working hours from women and men who care about our community and its people.
Sandra Yates, Macon Bibb County Public Works.
How's Gary Hampshire, Georgia Citizens?
Emma Gonzalez Stembridge, Aries.
Kevin Markley, Sideways Director, Macon Bibb County.
Miranda Guy, Administrative Officer from Macon Bibb County Emergency Management Agency.
Robert Walker, Macon Bibb County Rec Department.
Kevin Green, Aries member.
Sergeant Mullis, Macon Bibb County Fire Department. Sergeant Cosner here, Macon Bibb Fire Department.
Marvin Land, Director of Public Works.
Art Hanner, EMA Volunteer, IT Department.
These are just a portion of the hundreds of people who work together to shelter, feed, help, recover, and repair. Thank you to everyone still helping Macon Bibb County move forward together.
So that's what we try to do, is we try to show people that it was a crisis on such a massive scale that we needed a way to thank people, and that was after the event. As I said, this is probably a much larger scale than what y'all will work with in a Main Street program. But the point I'm trying to make is we didn't start communicating about crisis response the day before the hurricane was supposed to hit. We started talking about that specific hurricane a week before, when it first looked like we might get impacted. We started talking about crisis response and disaster prep almost every other week. We have some story that involves EMA so that people have an understanding and our press can help us tell the story of what we're trying to do. Throughout the year, we are trying to we try to expand our existing communication network through our regular e-blasts, through our regular public forums, through our social media, so that when the crisis hits, we're not trying to build that network at the last minute. We're trying to always expand to reach more and more people every single week. It's not if a crisis hits, it's when. And so my recommendation is start thinking through different crisis scenarios now. Go ahead and get your partners lined up and talk about who's going to do what and build that communication network today.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to ask you, Chris, is there a good first step for communities who may have like nothing in place? Like, they kind of end up being the catch-all for all this stuff. How do where's a good like starting point for them?
I would figure out who your partners are and get them on your communication list. In your Main Street area, I'm going to assume you're like our Main Street where there's a clearly defined area. Main Street runs from this street to this street to this street. Go knock on the doors of your businesses, go knock on the doors of the the landlords who have the lofts and the apartment units and say, I'm with Main Street. I want to let you know, I want to keep you informed what's going on a regular basis in this area of town. I'm here to be your advocate. Also, if something were to happen, I need a way to reach you quickly. You sell it on this front end as keeping people informed at all times. So if you've got every property owner's email address and cell phone number, when let's say there's a line of severe weather coming through with potential for tornadoes, you can pop them all a quick email that says, hey, this is what our emergency management agency is saying, time to hunker down, and here's some safety tips. It's not something that happens overnight. I mean, the 1,600 likes in 3 days that I had at the school district, that's not the norm. I'm very excited that on our email blast, in which you're interested, you can sign up for it by emailing me at my address at the bottom. We add 5 or 6 addresses a week, and I think that's great. I wish it were more, but the fact that it is a steady increase is good. We do have, our EMA does a text and they have an automatic text, phone, email system they can do for disaster information. We see a kind of steady growth on that, but when there is a severe line coming through, we see it spike. Every time there's severe weather, it spikes, and we take advantage of that. If you're trying to push social media, every time you put out a press release, put your social media in there. If you have an e-newsletter, make regular posts on sign up. You just got to keep reiterating this communication piece over and over and how you reach people. You also want to engage your partners. I mean, I know Main Street sits in different agencies, whether it's in some people's chamber or some people's tourism department, or whether it's in economic community development or part of a mayor's office. It's all in different places. But if you've got partners in the agency, let's say you've got a convention and visitors bureau, go to them and say, look, we need your help getting information out. Let's talk about now that if I, as the Main Street manager, have a crisis that I need information to get far and wide, help me out by spreading it to your communication list. Get people who are willing to support you as soon as you send it out. We're fortunate in making BIB that after 15 years here, we've got a good set of PR people that I can call up and say, this is what I need. Please forward whatever I send to you to your list. One of my closer colleagues is the PR director at the school system. She will take my information, copy and paste it into hers, and distribute through her school network, which includes 3,800 employees and reaches thousands and thousands of families. And vice versa, I'll take her information, drop it into mine, and send it out. That way we're trying to reach as many people as possible.
I think that makes a lot of sense and very good points. I liked how you mentioned too in the presentation about giving kind of the same talking points to even people at the city. So that way, whoever kind of the touch point is for the community, if they're reaching out, they're all getting the same message. I thought that was, very insightful.
I learned that lesson the hard way. We had a gun in a school years and years and years ago. And we did what we did normally. We got the press release to our school board so they knew it ahead of time. We put the phone call together, had the principal send it out, and the automated phone call went to all the parents in the school. Now, at this point, the gun had been found, no one was harmed, someone had been arrested, everything was fine. But all the parents heard was, we found a gun in the school. They hung up the phone, and we're sitting there thinking, getting ready to pat ourselves on the back. The secretary comes in the office and goes, "What did you just do, Chris?" Because her phone had blown up and I hadn't given her the answers to the questions.
Yeah. So
we changed our strategy. We sent it to our Board of Education members first. I gave it to the front desk. Then we sent it out to the public. She and I are still very close friends, and we laugh about that all the time, but it was a good lesson. You want to realize that it's not just you sending information out. People are going to have questions, and you have to know where they're going to ask those questions. So make sure the answers are at those places.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. I loved everything you had to say. Again, Chris's information is here on the page if you want to follow up with him directly, have any more in-depth communications questions. You can also reach out to Tess Harper, our communications and training coordinator. Again, Tess and Chris have worked together for a while, so I'm sure both of them have some insights they can share, and we will have this up on our YouTube channel. So thank you, Chris. We appreciate your time and you sharing this information with us.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll see y'all later.